Well, welcome to the roundtable for Cad Admin, and I appreciate everybody joining us here this afternoon. My name is John MacArthur, and we got Ryan Cole here on the Midwest AE here. And we wanted to get a session together to kind of go over some top-level CAD administration stuff with everybody, and really trying to target some of the challenges of our particular times here with a lot of work at home and people taking on new roles, putting on new hats, things of that nature, right? So, for registration purposes and things, Zoom has us make this into a webinar. So we'll want to have you guys raise your hands as you have a comment or a question, and then we can unmute you. You can choose whether to show your screen and then ask your question and join the conversation. In lieu of that happening, Ryan and I are going to do some kind of conversation back and forth to try to keep this as interactive as we can. If you prefer, you can also put questions into the Q&A or the chat, and we can answer them, via text as well or out loud in that regard. Ryan's got 3 topics that he's going to cover with us today, and we're not limited to that, right? Like those were kind of the 3 that we figured we'd start with anyways, and by all means, anything CAD admin is certainly on the table if you've got questions on it throughout today's session. I think we're shooting for an hour and a half. Is that right, Ryan?
Yep.
Cool. Sounds good. So, what were the 3 big bullet points you were planning on covering with us today, Ryan?
So a couple things that come up, especially in today's time, is we've got the different licenses that are available and how they can be managed. And then we also wanted to hit upon the working at home, especially in today's with the COVID and everything, with COVID and everything going on. There's a lot of questions about it, and there's been some restrictions with licensing over the past couple of years, and still trying to figure out how to get around that. And then last, I wanted to get into some of the admin portals. If the users are admins out there and they want to get like a kind of basic information of what's going on out there. They want to know what the health of the systems are. We've got some nice tools that are available. Kind of wanted to show those off. I don't think they're used enough, and I think quite honestly they're not used because people just don't know they're there. So those are kind of what I want to hit upon today. And then obviously this is a roundtable, so I would say it's open for anything. And if we don't have an answer for you right at that time, then we can definitely get some information to you. But we should be able to answer most questions from you guys today. So let's see, going into it, license managements, the different licenses that are available. I know that John and I were just talking. There's been John, you said that you had just gotten a hold of a couple people, or they had gotten a hold of you, just kind of thrown into the admin side of things, and now they're kind of playing in the deep end of the pool. Don't really know what's going on. Don't know what's available. Don't know if what they have is good. And that's really what I want to kind of hit on here is the licenses that are available, different license types that are available. So basically your first run, and this is kind of tough to show you guys because there's nothing really to show. But when we get into the licenses, there's a couple different ways you can get it. There is the standalone license. There is the network net license capability. And then something that's a little bit newer is what we call the online licensing as well too. Now standalone is, if we hit upon standalone, basically with standalone, you get a 24-digit serial number, you install it on a computer, you activate that computer. And that's kind of how that standalone works at this time. And so, the thing that you can do with that, though, is that you do have the ability to activate and deactivate as well. In fact, we'll get Solidworks running in the background here because I can kind of show you where to go. I can't show you mine because I actually happen to have a network license. But there are places that you can go. And so if you need to switch it to a home computer, and this is when we talk about working at home, this is one of the options that you would have the ability to do. It's a little bit more user unfriendly, I guess, for lack of a better word. There's a lot more manual operation that you guys have to go through to be able to switch license around. But basically, when we say standalone, that's really what it comes down to. A license geared to a particular person or a particular computer, and that's what the standalone does for you. John, does that kind of cover everything you think for the standalone? Is there anything else that I might be missing, or is that?
So one thing that I do see come up a lot of customers are asking us, what, really ties it to a computer, right? And as Ryan mentioned, it is tied to a computer. So, it's tying to the computer hard drive ID as part of the activation process. So one of the common things that we see across tech support is a computer dies or IT wiped the operating system before SolidWorks got to get cleaned off of
Yeah.
there. And as a whole, with a network license, that's not so much of a problem, but definitely an issue with your standalones, right? So, what Ryan's going to show here is the deactivation process, or at least where those buttons are in SolidWorks. And that works great if SolidWorks is still operational on said computer, right? But if SolidWorks is gone, the operating system got wipes, if you caught a virus, anything like that, hard drive quit spinning, just give us a call on support, shoot us an email, support@GoEngineer.com. We're glad to go in and take care of deactivating that license. It basically kills the computer hard drive ID that you had it associated to and opens up your activation to move to another machine.
Yeah, and I would definitely say make sure you have your serial number handy because that's always super helpful with this. And then the computer name as well too is what I always found to be pretty beneficial. So to be able to have that computer name to match it up to make sure you're turning it off, and turning the right one off, and stuff like that. So, but really, if you get onto SolidWorks, in order to activate or deactivate, activation kind of automatically happens. But you can go to the help icon. This is in 2020 where they've moved the help over to the right hand side. Otherwise, you can go to help. That's in the menu right here. But you'll come down here and there is a deactivate activate line item down here. And like I said, I am on a network license. We're going to talk about network licenses here in just a moment. But that's where you'd have it. It's kind of follow the prompts. It'll ask you which number do you want to deactivate. You can do it online. You click it, you wait a second or two, it comes up and says been deactivated. And then if you happen to have the software installed in two different places, you say you have a home version or a home installation, you can go to that home installation, go through the same process, activate it, and then now you'll have access on a different computer. But like I said, it's not a network, it's not automated. One of the things that people get stuck into is you'll activate it on a computer, say at the house, and then you go back to work and you forgot to deactivate. And that's where things can get real ugly real quick. So it is one of those things that you have to make sure you absolutely deactivate it before you try to pull it onto another computer, or if you're swapping it. And that's one thing that you really have to keep close in mind. Now, the next thing we talk about here is the solid network license. It's what I'm on. This kind of gets a lot easier. This is with a network license, you're able to have a seat of SolidWorks on the network license, and you could install it on 10 different computers, and one of those computers at a time would be able to be activated. And I say activated, but basically what happens is when I start SolidWorks Helps, it's going to go to the network license manager. It's going to say, do I have a license available? And if you do, well, then you can start running it. Or if someone else had that license, then it's going to get into the situation where you'll have to say, okay, who's got the license? Tell them to get off, or whatever it may be. But this will give you that freedom of having more seats installed than what you actually own. So if you've got a couple of hardcore users that are on every day, all day, you'll have maybe some set licenses for them. But then you have maybe 4 or 5 people that get into it every once in a while. Sometimes they get into it, sometimes they get out of it, but they're only in it for a couple minutes at a time. That's where the network license really comes in to be real nice to have. It gives you that flexibility without having everybody have one of these licenses. Plus, that whole activation thing goes out the window, mostly due to the fact that you are now, the license manager is controlling all that. So I don't have to deactivate, reactivate any of that stuff in the background.
I think that's really important to note for that prior, discussion that I brought up, right? The wiping of a computer, the failure of an operating system or
Yeah.
hard drive. If you're on a network license, none of that matters.
No, it
Fire
doesn't matter at all, right? Yeah, you can
all
install
work.
a brand new, update the OS, do whatever you need to, quickly click, and you're back in the system. So most definitely the network system gives you the most flexibility is what I would say. In fact, this is kind of what it takes a look like. This is we're looking at the server side. The difference between a client side and server side is this one button right here is really what it comes down to. This is where you can control it. SolidWorks wants you to have it on a server type atmosphere, but I'm running mine on a Windows 10. So if you guys are a smaller group or whatever, you don't necessarily have to have an expensive server to put it onto, and it runs it fine. But from the user side, you do have some access here. So one of the things that we have is under license usage. We can see that here's my different licenses that are available. If I come in to say SolidWorks Standard, you can see I have one license there. If I come into Solidworks Premium, wherever it went, and I lost it.
Yep, you were just on it.
Oh, was I? Oh, Solidworks Premium. There you go. Woo! You can see that it's there. So the nice thing is if someone happens to have it, you will see their name underneath here. If I do a quick refresh, because I have Solidworks running in the background, it should show my name. Actually, let's go to the standard and see if it does it. Apparently, it's not catching the fact that I'm using SolidWorks, so I have an extra license available today, apparently. But underneath here, it'll show you what user, at least what computer user is utilizing that, the computer name itself, and then what they're using, when they started using it as well, too. But there's a couple of other things in here. And one of those things that we're talking about, and we'll get into a little bit later, is the fact that we can borrow the license as well, too. Some situations that we get into is you have people that are working in-house and then they have to go visit a customer and they have to have access to SolidWorks. Well, an easy way to do it, especially if they're on a laptop, is I can come in, pick a software that I need. I'll say I need the SolidWorks Premium, and then I can tell it how much do I need to borrow it for. And then once I hit the borrow button, it's going to come over here. I can now disconnect from the network and utilize that software at that time. So it allows you to pull that license for a set amount of days. If you pull it for 3 days, at the end of the 3 days, the laptop will then stop borrowing the license, and then that license will now turn back on in here. So it's not available until the end of the day or until you come back in, reconnect up to your network, and then hit the return button. That'll free that license up for you. So with the network license, you have a little bit of capability here. Not only do you have it so that you can install on multiple seats and only have the set amount running, but you can also pull the licenses as well too. And it is one of the things that you can utilize if you are working from home, which we're going to get into a little bit later. We'll talk about this again in that particular situation. So other than that, it pretty much that's kind of what we cover as far as the license manager. So is there anything, John, that I'm missing here?
So one thing I'd point out is the license usage has, your different licenses of SolidWorks on it. And then there's a license order tab there. And what that's really all about is effectively what order are these licenses pulled in, right? So if your add-ins are also controlling, what license gets pulled off the network, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I found over the years confuses a lot of customers when they look at the license usage tab. If they have, let's say 10 seats of SolidWorks Standard, they have 3 seats of Professional and 2 seats of Premium, you will see 15 seats of SolidWorks Standard on this license manager. And the reason for that is that you need a seat of Standard and then you pull the higher level packages, right? And that's really where the add-ins that you have turned on in the license order comes into play. So just keep that in mind as you're pulling licenses. There is something that's probably worth showing as well. Ryan, can you bring up the add-ins screen? And I want to take a look real quick at the checkboxes in there. So there's 2 checkboxes here for your different products, right? On the left is whether it's turned on right now. And on the right is really important. That second checkbox is at startup, right? So we've had a lot of customers, like somebody comes in, fires up SolidWorks off the network, and they've got every add-in turned on. They're pulling tons of licensing off the network, whether they're actually using it or not, right? So my recommendation in the shared network license environment is to turn these on as applicable, right? Now, if you've got 1 seat of sim and there's one really specific person that uses the simulation stuff, like Ryan mentioned, we can kind of carve that out for people. Or they can turn on that at startup, and that might, make sense. But a lot of times, you'll want this to kind of, if you truly want a floating license that you're sharing, you'll want to have the add-ins off at startup as well.
Well,
Right?
and actually, that's a good thing to point out. Like you could have them turn it on automatically. The problem is if they turn off their license, that license gets removed and then sent back, and so someone else could get into it before they get back into SolidWorks. So it's the whole who's in first type game. When you get into the network license, there is an option, or there's a capability of getting at what's called an options file. And I went to the blog because this is one of those things where even I follow the directions, piece by piece here. But the ability to put in an options file, this is actually through the network license manager. So if you have a network license and you're in the manager, you can create this options file. It's just a TXT file. And when you get in there, you can basically add in things like timeouts. So you can make it so that after so many seconds of inactivity, it actually bombs itself out at that time. So after 5 minutes of someone not touching SolidWorks, maybe they're away from their desk, maybe they're in doing other work, they're out on the floor, whatever it may be, then you can make it so the license gets shoved back into the general pool at that time. Other things that you can do is you can create groups in here as well too. So kind of hitting upon what John said, if you have simulation people, other people may not need the simulation tool. So what you do is you can create a group specifically for the simulation people, put their usernames into it, and then what happens is when they log in, they will automatically be pulling the right not cam, but the right SIM package at that time. If you're not in that group, you will not be able to get that information. So it allows admins to better control who has access to what. You've got detailers that are just doing drawings on the thing on SolidWorks. They don't have to have access to any of the add-ons. So what you do is you put them in a group and then say they can pull the standard license, and that's all they have access to. But you can mix and match that. So here we've got the license permissions options, so you can make groupings, who can do what, reserving options for these people as well too. So here we can see that they're actually reserving the SolidWorks Office Premium, CW Pro for the group engineering group. And these are the people in the engineering group. So you can concatenate a lot of information together, control it very explicitly. You can make the timeouts happen so that after 10 minutes, the licenses are freeing themselves up. And it stops the whole like, well, this person's in it. And honestly, I've done it myself. I've gone into it, turned on SolidWorks, pulled a license, was starting to work, got called out to the floor 4 hours later, come back, and there's a whole bunch of people that are mad because they're like, well, you had it open on your screen. We didn't know if we could turn it off. This gets rid of that at that time. So the options file allows you to really control what you can do, how you can do it, who gets what, how long they get it, all that information at that time. I
So
saw.
that option file is read into the server, right? And it's kind of an odd place where that occurs, right? It's during the activation process. So there's a file on the hard drive. It's basically just a little notepad file, as you can see, is open there, and then the blog article that Ryan's got up. And as you go to activate your license, it'll say, hey, do you want to use a options file? And that's where you can check the box to browse out for it and modify that file, right? And that's where that gets read in, and that's effectively the rules at which you have dictated the licenses are doled out from the server, right? While we're on that screen, it's probably worth noting the firewall ports that it's using as you are using a license manager here, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's only 25.734. And that's a good start, but I've had a lot of situations where customers have called me over the years and they said, sometimes I can get a license off the network and sometimes I can't. And the reason for that is generally that top box is unchecked, that a firewall is in use on the server. I recommend that being checked all the time. And the reason for that is what it really does is it fixes the vendor daemon port. And to be clear on what that is, because it kind of reads like gobbledygook, right? That's fixing the port at which the license is pushed back out. So there's a listener going on over 25.734. When Ryan fires up SolidWorks, it goes out to his server name and it's pulling a license through the vendor daemon port. So it basically communicates to the license manager on 25.734. It says, yes, there's a license available, and then it sends it back through 25.735. If that top checkbox is turned off, then it's randomizing the vendor daemon port. So effectively, you're phoning home on one line, and then it just randomly picks a port to send it back on.
And if
Hence
that's
this,
blocked, then no one
can't
gets
get a
the
license
information.
from.
There you go. Right.
So make sure that you've got, that box checked, in my opinion, all the time, even if the firewall's not on, just to fix the port, and then make sure those two ports are open in the firewall.
Yeah.
If you still have issues after those two ports are open, there's a couple of executables that we can allow through the firewall as well that has resolved problems for some customers as well.
And for the most part, the admins can call tech support for that, right? That's right up their alley. This is an issue they're having. So, on average, don't spend too much time in it. If you're an admin, you got access to the server. There's a couple ports. Play around with them. Hit the the low hanging fruit ones. But after that, stop wasting time. Get on the phone with one of our techs. We're going to be able to zoom in, write exactly what it is. You can sit there and play with the ports all day. Come to find out, all it is you have to let this one executable go through, and now everything's working right. So, keep in mind that you do have access to support. We're not, you don't have to know everything, and we're not going to be able to answer everything as well too here. There is a couple of questions that popped up as well too. John, did you get a chance to answer those or no?
I didn't. I wanted to kind of try to keep this as interactive as we could. So, I want to kind of speak to those as we go into this, right? And I think it makes sense to jump out there. If we look at it, I think the first question was, is there any change for the standalone? Might have had a typo in there. Standalone licensing really hasn't changed much over the years, with the exception that the home license activation did go away a few years back. It's been replaced by online licensing, which Ryan mentioned, but we actually haven't jumped into yet.
Haven't talked about yet.
So I think that's probably a good segue into the next section.
Yep.
Before we do that, let's cover the other two. We had can we explain the differences between standard, pro, and premium? There's a lot of white paper documentation out there on that, but I'll speak to it real quick here. Solidworks Standard basically has all of your design tools. Drawings, CAD modeling, assemblies, right? And unlike a number of other softwares on the market, our fabrication tools are built in. So your sheet metal, your weldments, and things of that nature are all part of core SolidWorks, right? When you get up into SolidWorks Professional, you're adding utilities like SolidWorks Toolbox. So for example, SolidWorks Standard has a hole wizard that can punch ANSI standard holes into material for you. SolidWorks Toolbox and Professional is going to populate the screw into that hole for your bill of materials. Visualize is another package for rendering that comes with SolidWorks Professional, as well as PhotoView 360. PhotoView 360 is an internal rendering engine that is CPU rendering inside of SolidWorks. And then Visualize is an external software that imports SolidWorks models, and that's a hybrid CPU-GPU renderer. And the other big hitter in SolidWorks Pro is PDM Standard, which is a data management utility that comes with your SolidWorks Professional licensing. SolidWorks Premium has everything in the prior two packages, and as you get up into the premium software, we are introducing a couple of high-level functionalities, particularly assembly-level FEA analysis, as well as routing capabilities for wiring, things of that nature. There's some surface flatten tools as well, but I think those are the heavy hitters between the three. But like I said, if you want to follow up with your sales rep, they've got tons of white paper documentation on what features are in what version of the software. But that's kind of the high level there. And the last one was to
auto change if you try to log into a second computer, shuts down the first computer.
Yep.
No, there is no auto change. I can, that's what the network license basically does. You can log out, you can turn off one computer, get into the other one, but we do have capability getting close to that. And I think that's that third license type that's why the segues so nicely here with this question. So we've got the standalone, we've got the network, and then we have the online licensing, which is basically a standalone that you switch over to a different type. And John, is there costs associated with this?
No, online licensing is included relative to your standard license, and you can, as a customer, toggle that back and forth as many times as you want. Okay. So one of the things Ryan mentioned earlier about standalone was there's that manual activation, deactivation process if you're moving computers, right? And the idea behind online was to get rid of that process, right?
Yeah.
You basically transfer your license and it becomes Ryan's license, right? And then as you use Ryan's license, you can now have that installed on multiple computers. They do need to be connected to the internet when they launch and run SolidWorks because it's getting its licensing from an online location and it's verifying that you're not running it more than once, right? So it's effectively a very similar functionality to the network licensing without the need for the server. However, it's important to note that that's meant for the same user, right? It's in the license agreement. The online licensing is not meant to be installed on 15 different engineers' computers and only used once at a time, all named Ryan, right? That's what a network license is for.
Yeah.
What an online license is really for is that that scenario, so you don't have to activate and deactivate your licensing all the time.
Well, and to kind of weave into that, that's one of the things is you need to log into the portal, the customer portal, and then you also need to be added into the group as well too. In fact, if I kind of show you guys this, that online capability here is, let me go to solidworks.com. So my solidworks.com, if I log into it, which I'm already logged into it here, this is where you can get into the admin portion here where you can actually start to change that around. And so when I click on it, it's already figured out that I'm on it somewhere. Where am I with the 14 windows that I have open? There it is. I'm on this screen. So if I come in here, let me go ahead and close that one down. And we'll get back into the admin. So one of the steps is you have to get into the admin here. We'll go ahead and, I've been totally bombed out of the whole thing. Actually, what I was going to show you, I don't have admin access. So John is actually one of our licensed admins for GoEngineer. I am not. I'm actually going to stop sharing. John, are you okay to show your screen?
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
And so what happens is you become, when you're in the admin side, so whether you do this or the admin of the system does this as well too, this is where you can get into it. So one of the things you can see here is you got the names of the people that are out there. That's why you have to have a login. You have who is a right. Like I am a current member of this group, but I'm not an admin. So it means I can't change stuff around. And then if John would be so nice to find my name and switch me to admin, that would be awesome, John. And then also you have their email addresses, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm just not in the
You're
system
just not in the
apparently.
system at all,
So
apparently.
no one likes me. All right. So what we're running into here, but this is where you can actually assign license numbers to a user. You can change it to get into a situation where they can do the online licensing. And the online licensing is actually going to be coming around to the whole fact that yeah, we'll see if this works. It comes into the fact that it allows you to remotely deactivate. So basically, what happens is you've activated this with a standalone with the online licensing. You've gone to your house, you've activated it through the login, through the online stuff. You don't deactivate it, you come back to work. And if you didn't have online licensing, you're kind of just done at that point. Like there's nothing you can do except get back to your house. And in rare occasions, you can call tech support. We might be able to do something for you. But the online licensing allows you to log in at work and you can deactivate that other computer remotely. So, Johan, the chance to auto do it, no, it doesn't automatically do it, but the online licensing allows you to do this when you need to. So it does get rid of the whole kickamaroo that you get into with like, oh man, I didn't log out, I didn't disable, what do I do now? And if you're busy at work, it gets really ugly really quick. So the online licensing, we have a couple pieces out there. Probably the best thing to do is if you want to get into it, there's two places I would say to look at. One is I have a PDF, and John, I'm going to take over. Did you need to show anything else here?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And I want to direct you guys to two places to get information. One, there's a PDF that literally walks through it step by step by step by step. If you've got a decent reading level, follow these step by step. They go through. They tell you how to log in. They tell you where to go here. Here's the screen that we are seeing on John's computer, and kind of just carry it on through there. The other one is our ubiquitous Darren Grosser. He made a video that walks through the same process as well too. That is on the GoEngineer YouTube channel, and it once again walks through it step by step, where to go, what to do, what to type in. These are some of the screens that you just saw there. So he actually walks through those step by step for you guys as well too. So a couple places for good information to really deep dive. If it's something that you're interested in, we want to present it to you guys. Is more just to say, here's what's available to you guys. And then if you have further questions, you'll have our contact, whether it's support or even myself. We'll be happy to get in there and get in there. So just like I said, keep that in mind. You got the 3 different licenses: standalone, which you have to deactivate. You have the network license, which kind of does that automatically. As long as you're on site, you do have the ability to borrow licenses as well. And then last but not least, we have the online licensing, which you convert your standalone to the online licensing. Gives you a little bit more flexibility, but do keep in mind, and John's right, and it's something that we have to repeat, it's not meant for 15 different users. It's meant for one user to have the flexibility. So keep that in mind as you go through and stuff like that. And I will say SolidWorks has a way of seeing these things. So please don't have SolidWorks give us a call, because then we have to call you, and it's just an uncomfortable meeting after that time. So hopefully that kind of answers most of the thing about the different kinds of licenses available as far as how to manage them. We did cover the different types of licenses as far as standard, pro, and premium as well too. And all of it is controlled with the standalone, the online, and the network. Thank you very much. Brain's fuzzing out.
Wrapping the licensing section on things, there was a prior question in the chat I wanted to make sure everybody caught the answer to here. Was what's the longest borrow that the network license can do? The default longest borrow is 30 days, and then you just need to be connected, and then you can borrow for another 30, right? If you have a situation where you do need to borrow for more length of time, shoot us a message. We can submit a ticket to SolidWorks to get that extended, I believe, up to 90 days without having to phone home back to the license manager. It's definitely worth understanding, though, that the entire time that you have a SolidWorks license borrowed, it is used on your network, right? So no one else can be using that while it's borrowed to your computer. So you typically want to borrow that for the least amount of time you can, and still connect. And we'll get into some of the ins and outs of that when we start talking about the next section here, which is the work from home stuff.
Working out of home, yep. Yeah, so and that's something that we've really had to deal with, and once again, we put some blogs out and videos out specifically for this. That was one of the videos that we talked about with Darren there. But the main thing here is, there's a couple different ways. If you have a standalone license, you're looking at the activate, deactivate, whether you have a computer at home or you're putting it onto a laptop, but that's going to deactivate the license. So that's one capability that you have out there. A lot of companies have gone to the network license as well too. And you could borrow it, but like I know here in the Midwest, at least in Michigan, we're on John, a 2-week, 3-week shutdown right now. You can't, you can borrow the license, but you're getting kind of close to that end result there. Plus you're kind of losing that flexibility. What if you need to gain something else? What if you didn't grab everything you needed? What if you didn't borrow, say, the simulation stuff or whatever? So one of the things that you have the ability to do, especially if you have a network license setup, is you can get into the VPN side of things. And what it is you can add the VPN software to the laptop or the computer at home. They can be on the internet, and that would allow them to at least talk to the server. There's not a lot of information being traveled back and forth, so you could keep it open as a live version. But I know from my own practices, what I would normally do is I would get on and then borrow the license for maybe a day. And then that would allow me to borrow the license. I could turn my VPN off, and then I could do my work that I needed to. If I happen to finish up early, I could log back in through the VPN, and then I could check the license back in if I wanted to, or if I needed more time, I could log back in. So you kind of have a choice, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, kind of have a choice. You can either stay logged into the VPN the whole time, or you can borrow it, check it out, and put it back in. Is there issues of staying on all the time versus borrowing and checking out?
And that really just depends on your VPN connection, right? I myself have at least 7 different VPN softwares for various customers on my computer at any time, right? And the trick to that is the connectivity, right? So in my case, I'm not getting to licensing, but I'm getting access to servers for services and remote work. And for the most part, I've had really good luck with a lot of that, but I do have good internet at my home shop here, right? A big part of it is throttled by your home bandwidth as well as the VPN itself. So when you think about a VPN, this virtual private network is effectively a tunnel from your home network to the work network with, some credentials, right? So that not anybody can get in. And in doing so, that bottleneck ends up effectively being both, right? So if you've got a fast VPN and a slow connection at a house, you can have a poor performing environment in that regard. If you've got a slow connection at work, speeding up your home internet doesn't work, right? But as Ryan mentioned, the license manager itself is super lightweight. So as long as it's at least connected, generally speaking, the licensing is going to be fine, right? It's where it starts if you are dropping on and off the VPN throughout the day because it's got disconnection problems. You could be in a spot where SolidWorks is like, hey, I don't have a license, and it shuts off, right? When you try to relaunch, it can't get one. So that's a scenario where you should probably be doing a borrow, right? Ultimately, I look at borrowing a license as really a means of an unstable VPN. It's worth noting as well that what Ryan's talking about here is purely the SolidWorks licensing and not the files themselves, right? So the files themselves are going to be, there's a multitude of things for that, right? If you took a copy of those locally, then that's all you need is a borrowed license, right? But if you, say, are accessing those files on a network drive, you're really going to need to stay connected to the VPN just to get access to the CAD files themselves, right? And it can be tricky trying to work over a VPN with a very slow connection, especially on large assemblies, right? If you've got a lot of large assemblies that are out on a network drive, you're probably going to have a bit of a slow performing time trying to work on that data.
Very slow performing time.
So and the reason for that is because of the save operation and the open operation, right? The open and save in a network environment is going all the time over that network, and through a VPN, you're at that bottleneck all the time during that save and that open op. And that's really where a product like PDM comes into play, right? And it's not what I call the absolute perfect solution, but it definitely brings a lot to the table with regard to locally caching the files. So here, Ryan's browsed into a local view inside of a PDM environment, and it's important to note the functionality I'm going to speak to here works in PDM Standard as well as PDM Professional. If you go into a given directory and you locally cache the files you want to work on, which is as simple as right-click, get latest, right? That'll pull a copy to this workstation before you go offline, and then you can pull the latest, greatest copy of all your parts, down, right? It's also worth noting that you can configure PDM to automatically cache standard part folders. So templates, toolbox, standards in general, you don't have to think about having to go cache those all the time. Then once you have all the data that you plan on working on, you're going to check out what you plan on making modifications to, right? Once you do that, you can go to this work offline mode, and that's effectively disconnecting PDM from the database. It also disconnects PDM from the licensing. So there is no borrowing a PDM license off of a network, right? The functionality there is borrow a license of SolidWorks, check out what you plan on working on over the VPN, and then go into offline mode, and you're no longer using a PDM license. And as you can see here, the folders turn blue. When you go to blue folders, you'll have all of the local files that you cached ahead of time. And you'll notice that writable column to the right there is no, because Ryan didn't check out his work before he went offline. So
And I
not
don't
the
I
end of
don't find this out until I get home, and oh man, I guess I can't do anything. Bummer.
and there is actually a workaround to that as well, right? So if you forgot to check out your work and you don't have access to be able to get back on the VPN, you can modify the write access to that document. You can copy it out. You can make modifications to it and copy it back in. Ultimately, what PDM is doing is it's putting that file into read-only mode on purpose, because that's the intent, right? You can override that, and then when you get back on network, you'll just need to make sure you check out that file and push your changes back into the vault, right? But in a perfect world, if you check that out ahead of time, and whatever files you plan on changing, right? And you could do check out all if you're the only one working on this project, right? And now if you go into an offline mode, you'll see that writable column says yes. And when that writable column says yes, you now have write access copy. And now you're working locally on that data with your borrowed SolidWorks license and not needing a VPN connection anymore to work on that job. Then either when you get back to work or you reconnect to the VPN at, let's say, the end of the day, you would save local all day long with the best performance, right? And then you would go back online and check in your changes, and thus mitigating how much traffic's going over the network, right?
And the benefit of doing it with the PDM system, though, is like I checked out 50 files. But if I only modified 4 files, when I checked back in all 50 files, only 4 of those files are being uploaded at that time. So, and that's the big difference is that, if I don't have the PDM system, I have to manage that manually. And most of the time I don't. I take the whole group of files and I just shove them back up to the server when I need to. With the PDM system, it kind of handles all that in the background, right?
It does. And that's important to note as well, is I've got a lot of phone calls from customers with their network computers, and this work from home thing becomes very tricky, right? If you think about that assembly, let's say there were 4 engineers working on that assembly in various different subs, right? If they all did what Ryan said he normally does, and they took a copy of that whole thing, and then they copied it back to the network at the end of the day, they are going to overwrite each other's work, right?
Last one in wins.
Have some changes made, but the last one that saved is going to end up being the winner there, right?
Yep.
And PDM can very much help prevent that as well, right?
Yep.
But that's kind of the trick to working over a VPN with regard to SolidWorks and the licensing, as well as PDM in its work offline mode, right? PDM is kind of the outlier there, because all the other licensing you can borrow off of the network, right? But they purposely don't do it with PDM, because if you're going to disconnect from the VPN, it really severs the tie to the way PDM functions, right? Ryan's clicked on a file here. It's reading a database of information to give that data card, right? And it needs access to the server to do so. So, your preview, your bill of materials, things like that, these are live reads to the database. So you're restricted in a work offline mode to, effectively what you have on native files, right?
Yep.
But it does let you not make copies of the data as you push things back and forth.
So as far as the work at home, you don't have to have a PDM system, but we had a customer, in fact, we did a PDM where we were talking about this, a PDM presentation, and one of our customers said that very thing. They said because of the COVID and because of their PDM system, not only did it allow their workers to work offsite, but it also allowed the workers offsite to work together on the same projects because they were able to balance this off. And, and once again, being able to check stuff out, yank the VPN line, work as fast as you can at full time, pretty beneficial at that time. So, like once again, not trying to sell the PDM system, but the PDM system does alleviate a lot of the headaches and issues that we're running into, especially with the fact that we have so many people working from home. John, we had another question here. It says from James Coleman, is there a discussion to make a network license similar to the online license? Basically does the same as a network license, but online and not on a server computer. So an off-site hosting of the license server.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The answer is no. I have not heard any talk from corporate of having an online server-based, license manager at this point. I think that would be a huge benefit if they do go that road myself. In the interim, I have had a number of customers hosting their license manager on the cloud,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And that is kind of the median to that, right? If you put your license manager out on a hosted operating system in the cloud, and your users can resolve that server name, you can effectively get that functionality today. But at this point, I have not heard anything that SolidWorks is driving towards offering that. At this point, it's online standalones or network borrowing is the two forms of that today.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues that we run into with that is then you have to have it per person and not per install. So, and I think Dassault does do something like that on the CATIA side, something similar to it, but it is you buy the license for the person and that's who it goes to, and nobody else can use that license. So, I think at this point it kind of gives us a little bit more freedom than if we did go down that route. So, but and James, I think John hit it pretty good. Is there one for it? No, but is there something that can work like it? Definitely, you can host it on an offsite cloud or an offsite server or whatever the, way you want to get into it. So there's options always. So if it's something that, once again, if you want to pursue, get a hold of us. Let's make sure we're talking about the same thing here at that time. As far as at home, John, is there any other points that I kind of missed here? I mean, we've got the online licensing and stuff like that, but and the VPN, the knowing the ports, especially if you have a network license, that's important because now the VPN has to be able to talk through those ports, and then the person's computer has to be able to talk with those ports as well too. So that gets into a little bit of an IT stickiness, depending on what's going on. But once again, we can usually figure it out pretty quickly there as far as what's going on. I guess if anything, the only other options that are out there is some of the new virtual desktops, John. I know we didn't talk about this between you and I, but those are starting to become more prevalent out there as well too, where you can just log in through, say, a Chrome window or an interface and get access to it. And so we use those for our training sessions here, correct?
We do, yeah. It's
And
it's a really powerful new technology on the market for sure. I feel that a lot of work from home questions with customers that to help mitigate these large data sets transferring back and forth over the VPN, their solution has been, well, let's just remote into the machine at work, right? We might not have a good, CAD computer at the house. So if we're talking about just RDP remote desktop into a tower with SolidWorks on it, how does that work out? Well, speaking directly to that, there's some fundamental problems with it, right? Remote desktop is great for controlling a mouse, and you get the performance of the local network, right? You could stay connected to SolidWorks, not borrow a license because you're just remoting into a machine that is on network, and there's a ton of benefit there. The challenge at hand by far is that remote desktop does not utilize the video card to its extent, right? It can't transfer the power of the GPU over that internet connection. So you're going to get some pretty poor performance in an RDP environment in most cases. PDM's fine because it's not really a graphics heavy software. It's a database heavy software, and that's local, so it's good. But SolidWorks, especially with a large assembly, is going to suffer in performance in an RDP environment. What we've kind of spoke to today is localizing the files for the best performance, and talked about the ins and outs of PDM with regard to that. What Ryan's referring to is a new technology, commonly referred to as VDI, it's virtual desktop interface, and there are now servers entering the market that have not only the ability to remote in, but they can utilize the video card technology to overcome that limitation of a SolidWorks environment, right? And the nature of a CAD program that's so graphics heavy, right? And these servers are really impressive. We've got a couple of these things that we're pushing like 25 to 40 concurrent users on a server that's breaking out like twin Tesla cards that can live time, can facilitate, those end users. And we've even let Ryan turn these things on to just blast visualized renderings at them. And we've had just amazing turnarounds on that, like stuff the size of billboards getting done in hours rather than
Days
days
and weeks and stuff
of
like that.
rendering time.
Yeah.
They're really impressive computers. Obviously, they're bleeding edge, so they're quite expensive. The licensing for them is quite expensive, but they are, I think, quickly growing to be a great work at home solution.
Yeah.
It's really the best of both worlds, right? You can remote into this machine. You get all the power of the local network. You get all the power of the local video card, and you transcend operating system and weak hardware at your remote location.
Yep.
But with great power comes the great cost these days, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just one of more of those options that are out there. And once again, we find a lot of admin people, power users, managers. Over time, we find them actually spending a lot of time trying to figure out what's out there. And the main message I want to get across is just like this roundtable is get a hold of us, like call us up, see what we have, see what we're doing, see what's going on. Let's look at your particular situation that you're into, and let's figure out what the best situation is. And I've had situations where it's buy a $24,000 server to do what you need to do to, oh, we'll just switch you over to this license type. There's no cost on it. So it's not always going to cost money, but we're going to find the best solution that works for you guys. So just remember, get a hold of us. That's what we're here for.
That hit the interface here. Gary had a question of, is there a POC at Go that has experience with VDI? We're able to deploy a VDI cluster. Like Ryan was mentioning, if you want to get a hold of us, we can get you in touch with somebody who's done got some experience with that. We've deployed a couple of those servers now and are continuing to do so. Might take a little bit to get in touch with that person, but we'll definitely get them some info over to you if you want to have that chat.
All right, so that kind of covers all that. I guess the only thing I really want to get into is, especially from the admin type of thing, how do you get information? John, you worked support for many years. How many calls did you get where someone calls up and says, my computer keeps on crashing? And then we say, how much is it crashing? And they're like, it's crashing every other day, right? Those are tough calls for us because one, we don't know what the severity is. Two, some of the messages may have been canceled or not being read. And so therefore, when you do crash, the information's not getting saved the way that it should. And honestly, as users are coming in and talking to you, especially if you're an admin, your users might be coming to you first and you're kind of like shrugging your shoulders like, I don't know what to do if Solidworks has crashed. We need to get a whole tech support, but we're going to need information and stuff like that from you guys. So there's a couple different places I want to go and show you guys here. One of the first things I will tell you is this, the RX tool. It's a great tool there. Under diagnostics, it'll tell you what's going on. I've got a big red symbol up here because I have a later driver than it's looking for. Other problems that we have, or other things that we have here, is problem capture. It's going to gather all the log files. I had a person the other day say, is there any way I can gather all the log files together and take a look at it? Yeah, click on capture problem. This is going to pull program logs. It's going to pull system logs. It's going to put them all together. It allows the user to record any problems, and then it'll pull those files in as well too. But the one I want to kind of hit on here, I'm going to hit cancel, is the reliability. There's a lot of times where, when you're having issues with the computer, it's tough not to get irate. And if you've got a timeline coming up and a deadline coming up, it's even harder when your computer crashes. And someone calls me up and says, hey, I'm crashing like every other day or 2-3 times a day. Well, this is a reliability report off of my computer here, and that's actually being captured. This is all per day. So, on this day and this day, the little dots signify whether I crashed or whether I turned it off. Let's see if I can find when you're really, really good at SolidWorks, you crash less. There we go. I found a crash. Here is a different symbol here. So back on 1027, looks like SolidWorks was shut down, and let's see, did it do it? Yeah, killed by user. And this is one of those ones that we see here. So you'll get a couple different ones. You'll get a red dot, an orange dot, and a blue dot. Blue dot means that the person was able to shut the software down and it closed with no issues. The other one is the software crash. That's going to be a red dot. Here with the orange dot, this means that it's killed by the user. And this usually goes into the fact that the user's on there and you get the spinning wheel of death on the screen. They get impatient, do a right click, crash it out, and kind of move on. Well, that's where things get a little sticky. In 2020, we started getting more information on what was going on in the background, so that was kind of nice to have there. Usually, like if it says it's opening a file, if my processors are running, I don't crash a system out. I wait for it to complete, and a lot of times you never know. You could be crashing that out seconds before it was going to finish. So I always wait typically. But this is one thing that we do find is we find that the user will say they're crashing a bunch, but they're not actually crashing, they're actually crashing the computer. And that starts to get into a little bit more of what's going on here. If the computer does crash out, the nice thing is you do get some log events down here that are put up for you at that time. So you can kind of start to take a look into it. Or if you get online with tech support and say, hey, I've got a person that's crashed 4 times this week and it's all related to this particular module, now we have a good idea where to start looking. Do you need to update your .NET structure? Did something happen to the install of the software? Something, or do they not have the right, rights on the computer? So this kind of narrows it down a lot. I pick on the reliability though because it is on the computer, but this information also can be thrown up to the internet as well too. And that's really what I want to kind of show you here. Now, I am going to show you one thing before I get in there. It's under Tools and Options, and it's under General, right? Yes, this one right here. Help make SolidWorks products better by automatically sending your log files to DS SolidWorks Corporation. Everybody typically says no to this because everybody's like, nope, I don't want them to know what I'm doing. I don't know what okay. Honestly, this is an option that you're going to want turned on. And if you're working for a company that has quite a few users and you're kind of the admin or you're the one that everybody comes to, this is going to give you a really good set of information to pull from. So this data does one of two things. One, they are getting some usage data. When you crash, they are getting some crash data. But two, it's really what happens when you get into the system here. And I'm going to have to log back into it here. So let me get into SolidWorks. I'm just going to go to the solidworks.com website. Make sure you have a customer portal login or a My SolidWorks login. They are the same login. So if you have one for My SolidWorks, you have one for the customer portal as well too. The reason I like this is because under My Support, once you get into the portal, you do have, wait, is it My Support? Oh, there it is. Under References, you have the Cad Admin Dashboard. And we're going to let this come up, but basically that data that is being sent up to you guys, that is, this is where it's being captured. It's not just going to SolidWorks and they're hoarding all the information. They're compiling the information together and giving it to you guys so that you can get in here and not just see what's going on a computer, but what's going on all the computers that are in your system here. It is based on serial number here. And so, so I won't show you those, but it tells you what the options are. It tells you the machine details, whether your driver is supported or not. John and I chuckled a little bit because none of our drivers are supported, but we are also running a lot of different variations of the software. Whether there was a benchmark done, session details, the blue, the orange, and the red, what I talked about earlier, this is giving me a snapshot of how this has been running for. In fact, if I kind of take a look down here, let's go to 6. There we go. Mine happens to be there it is, that's mine. And here you can see that I've run pretty steady and there's been a situation where I had to shut down. But if you look at P rough here, a whole bunch of crashes from the computer, but they've been killing it as well too. I don't know if they're having issues. Maybe they're doing some testing and stuff like that. But there's a lot of information available here at this time. So it tells you what service pack they're running. That could be a big issue as well too. Service pack 4 could have fixed something, and you look in here and it's like, oh, well, no wonder it's not working. They're still in service pack 1. You don't have to go to their computer and look it up. You don't have to call them. You don't have to tell them what's going on. You can kind of just see what's going on here. Now, we can also get more information as well too. So we can see all the different what they call accounts. We can see what processor they're running, how much free hard drive space they have. That's going to be important. If they're running 3 or 4 meg down here, yeah, of course their computer is going to be crashing all the time. What graphics drivers they physically are on, the manufacturer, lots of information. So, a lot of people don't say, I don't want to share my data because I don't want them having all this data, but Solidworks is compiling it for you. So this is the best way. In fact, the only way you can start to compile this information, that option has to be turned on. In fact, it takes John, I don't know if you've had anything with it, but like it used to take a week or two before this started to really populate with any information. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a couple of databases that have to update there. But ultimately, once you get it rolling, you're getting pretty live time
Right,
information.
up to the yeah. Once it gets up and running. So, but RX benchmarks. If people are running the benchmarks, the data is also being put here. So not only do you get a health over here, you can see what they're running. You can see the health of it up here. You can see how you're kind of working today. When you jump to the new version of the software, well, if everybody's running really low, then maybe now it's time to start looking at a new graphics card, or maybe it's time to start looking at updating the computer. You don't have to do it on the customer's field, because honestly, a lot of us as users, if someone says, hey, do you think you need a new computer? Yes, I do. Absolutely. Come to me a week later and say, hey, do you think you need a new computer? Yes, absolutely. I need a new computer. This will give a little bit more of an honest, like, okay, are the computers running well? Are they running quickly? Are they starting to slow down? Are we hitting it to the point that our hardware is not keeping up with modern times? And then you can start looking at, okay, are they on the right drivers? So fixing the drivers, did that do anything? Well, yeah, we had a big increase in our benchmarks at that time. All right, well, then we solved it. So, definitely goes into it. The other thing is especially with these session details here, if I come in and take a look at it, I don't have any information from here to here. I don't think I have any, but basically that ends up looking just like this information, and you can see kind of a broad spectrum of all the users down here at that time. So we actually, that's Paul's laptop. Let's see if I click my name. Yeah, there you go. So there's my session details, how long I was on it, when I closed it. Here's what crash I had back in
Sometime.
September, apparently. So this kind of tells me, and honestly, this actually works for us as well too, as support people. We get irate customers. If you're an admin, you're going to get irate user bases. I'm crashing all the time. Well, if you look here and you find out that they crashed 3 times in the last week or the last month, now you start to go, okay, well, is this a concern? Is this something normal? Honestly, SolidWorks will say that there is a certain threshold of crashing that is available or acceptable out there. And people don't like being told that, but it is out there. If I look in here and see there's a whole bunch of orange, that's going to tell me a different story. That means like, okay, well, why did you crash this? That puts a little bit back on the user, because now they have to kind of say, okay, because I was sitting there. Well, how long were you sitting there? Well, I was sitting there for 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes, and you crashed it out. Like, why did you crash it after 3 minutes? Or did they sit there for 6 hours letting it grind before they finally killed it? That's going to tell you some information. And once again, that gets the information to us as well too. Now, I will tell you, with this whole portal here, the admin portal or the Cad admin portal, we as tech support people do not have access to this info. So this isn't something that we can take a look at and look and say, oh, look, it looks like they're running good and they're running good. This is going to be something that, you guys have to kind of keep an eye on. I think, John, a couple years ago, we talked to SolidWorks about maybe having an option where we could get into this, but it doesn't look like anything's really happened from that. And once again, the information is personal. Like, honestly, I probably shouldn't be showing you the information that's in here, but I do want to show you that there is a lot of captured information. The only thing is you have to make sure that option is turned on inside of SolidWorks in order to get that info.
So let's spend a little time with what Ryan, just had kind of, with some diagnostics there, right? The idea being here, if you turn this on, it is sharing, the log data. And I want to make really clear that is not sharing your CAD
Yeah.
data.
No
All
part
right.
information, no
Your
assemblies,
intellectual
no.
property is 100% not leaving your
Yeah,
computer.
absolutely.
Now that said, the RX utility and the problem capture that Ryan brought up on the screen has an option to include the files. When you do that, you are sending those files into the log, and it does zip those up. And that's typically going right to a ticket with SolidWorks Corporate, right? So, that's the one time that it is going to zip up and include your SolidWorks packages. And that's the package files button there that Ryan's showing there, right? That's the time that it's actually going to pull in your data. But the rest of this push and the information you've seen on, the benchmarks, the session details, things like that, none of that is pushing any kind of CAD data at all, right? When I look at, a situation with a customer, with, let's say, crashing, for example, right? Number one, first thing I'm going to look at is going to be the graphics card driver, right? It's very commonly overlooked during an upgrade in a lot of cases. But even worse, something to be very aware of as a CAD admin, Windows has a nasty habit of updating your video card driver without your permission. All right. It will absolutely just be like, hey, like you need the latest Dell driver for this. Yeah. And it puts it onto a computer. And that may or may not cause you grief. I have definitely been in situations where, we get on the phone and we're like, hey, you don't have an approved graphics card driver. And they're like, yeah, but I updated it to what you told me to yesterday, right? And you go through the log of this driver and you're finding out Windows is actually doing this. And Windows, Microsoft in general, has made it very hard to block video card driver updates now. Back in Win 7, you had more options. Win 10, they actually made that even more difficult. So keep an eye on that. That's likely one of the reasons that we have so many unsupported drivers on our admin portal page too. But not to mention, we're running every version of SolidWorks, in a lot of cases back 3 years or something or more, but definitely take a look at that. Ryan brought up hard drive space, big one, right? Like I've seen a lot of customers not realize they're functioning on like less than a gig of space left on their C drive. When your C drive is in the red, lots of things start not working properly, right? There's paging files that it's supposed to have access to, operating system information that it's got to preload into RAM, especially on solid state drives. So you really do need some breathing room on C for that information. Data drive, not so much, right? If that's purely a drive that you're storing information on, that's not such a big deal, but definitely the drive with the operating system or program files in general on it, right? Should have some breathing room with respect to that. But, a good place to start, take a look at the hard drive, take a look at the video card driver. If all of those are in pretty good shape, take a look at that last reboot, the second line down. I've seen a huge number of customers that just leave their computer running for weeks on end and never shut it down.
Weeks.
And they're like, I crash all the time. And I'm like, well, reboot your computer for me, please,
Yeah.
right? There's so many things that shutting down a computer does with the operating system, with releasing RAM, with releasing holds on video cards and things. Like I strongly recommend, rebooting a machine on a fairly regular basis. I see Ryan doesn't do it as often as I do.
No, actually, I hit the power button and then I hit the power button again. And it's not going into hibernate. And that's why I'm always confused by that, because I shut my computer down every night. So yeah, it's and I'm thinking I do not go to the file to the start and then shut down. And I think that's the last time I did it was 3 days ago, because I had a bunch of updates coming through. So on my laptop, hitting the power button apparently is not being triggered as a real reboot. And 10 to 1, I'll tell you what, 3 days ago my computer was working a lot nicer after I'd had some issues with it. So be careful of that, especially if you're on a laptop.
Yeah, for sure. The the reliability that Ryan showed, I think, is really powerful per workstation, and then the admin tools showing you for your total user base, right? You have control over what users are invited to this and and what machines that you can see. So this is very, very powerful from an administrative standpoint, right?
The locked
That service
options.
pack, you can lock down options inside of there now. The service pack one is an important one, right? Ryan mentioned that that we may have got a bug fixed in a service pack of the software, right? Who's on what SP across the board at my company? SolidWorks allows for a mismatch of service packs across your company. And it also allows for that in a PDM environment. I don't recommend it, right? Like at the end of the day, if possible, it's a good idea to have everybody in your organization on the same service pack. And in fact, there are a couple of SPRs out there that are like, hey, if service pack 4 talks to 5 on a file, this breaks, right? And the workaround is don't have a mixed environment of service pack 4 and 5, right? If you update all those machines to 5, that problem goes away. So I think it's a good place to see where they're at, because if you're not doing an admin image deployment, it can be kind of hard to tell what SP everybody's at in your organization, short of walking up to all their computers, right? If you're allowing users to update independently their own SolidWorks, you're bound to get a mismatch of these service packs, and that's exactly what's going on at Go. We all just update whenever we feel like it for testing purposes, and you'll see a giant slew of different SPs and versions of the software installed across our organization. That said, we're not typically working on each other's CAD data. It looks like most people are on 4, in Ryan's, page 6 list here. But there's a lot of different, versions and SPs out there with respect to this year and, next year's now software is SP 1 is already an EV for 2021 SolidWorks, right?
Yep.
But just tons of good information here. If you are inheriting or a longtime CAD admin at your organization and you're not using this, I would strongly recommend that you consider it. Like, there's a lot of really cool information in here, and it can really, really help you know where you're at, as well as us help you, right? And Ryan mentioned we do not have access to this. We cannot log into a customer's, admin portal. And you cannot invite us to it, to my knowledge.
No.
We requested that,
Still
haven't
not.
got it. But ultimately, we can absolutely do a screen share if you want to review this information with us, right? So if you want to share this with us, we can certainly log in and take a look at the system with you and kind of go over, who's having issues. And you're looking for, if you've got everybody crashing, there's going to be something on your environment in your network more than likely, unless you have a mass video card problem. But to Ryan's points earlier, if you got one user that's having crashing problems, cool. Let's jump in here and see why he's different. Why is that computer different than the others that's causing this? And if you don't see anything here, the next thing I would recommend is, what's that user doing that's different than other people, right? And that's really key. I've diagnosed a lot of issues over the years with customers, and sometimes it's purely the data sets they're working with, right? It's Ryan's job to import this horrible model from the big 3 and then do this before he sends it out to the rest of the equipment in my company.
Yeah.
And he crashes all the time.
And he's running on 8 gig of memory and a low-end video card.
You can see that, maybe we need to beef up his computer. Maybe that we just got bad data there, and that's part of the problem, right? I've had a customer with massive crashing, and it turned out to be one face on a giant exhaust system that was faulty, and as soon as you touched it, it crashed the software every time. There's a lot of silly stuff out there like that can cause a lot of grief. And I can say this, what appears random when it comes to crashing, these are ones and zeros in a computer, folks. There's nothing random about them, right? It just appears random because you haven't figured out the reason yet,
right.
And that's exactly what we're here for, right?
Well, and to lean in on that as well too, I've watched users. In fact, I work side by side with somebody. They have the same computer setup. They literally were working on the same job as I was, and they would crash 2-3 times a day. Well, the difference is I was going at SolidWorks pace on my computer that could handle it at a certain amount. And he was one of those people that like to try to click ahead a bunch of steps. And at a certain point, SolidWorks gets confused, bombs itself out. So, there is even a user access to this as well too. Do they have a 3D input device and they're flinging that around on a large assembly while they're kicking a bunch of faces out, and your graphic card is streaming, trying to keep up with you, and then all of a sudden the graphics card's like, I don't know what's going on. That sends it down, that topples. So there's a lot of different things that we can take a look at. And once again, don't, I've had people sit there and call us up on support and say, we've been having these issues for months. Well, hold on. Like, where were you at, 2.5 months ago? Where were you at 2 months and 3 weeks ago? When you start having these issues and it looks like it's endemic, you need to get a hold of us, because then we can start deep diving and get a hold of it before everybody's just super irate about, Solidworks crashing. Come to find out, everyone had the wrong freaking graphics driver in there. Fair enough, John?
Yep.
Don't yell at me. It's not my fault.
The kind of last topic that I think we want to touch on is really just the customer portal itself. And Ryan kind of jumped through it as he got to the Cad Admin Dashboard. But I want to jump back to this screen and kind of talk about what's here, right? And this is kind of a self-service location for you, right? There's a couple of key things under My Support in your SolidWorks portal. You've got Knowledge Base, which is a place where you can go search for your own problems, right? And I've had tremendous success with customers that, quite frankly, just do their own homework before they contact us, right? And it's great. Like, you go here, like, hey, I think I have
it's
this
not
going
that great
on.
because sometimes it's like like we know the customers have already done it, so they've already looked into all the possible issues. So now it's like, oh great. So
No, ultimately, if you can come with a good understanding of what you think this may be, we can narrow in on that
absolutely.
faster. Right? Do understand though that we're going to have access to more of the knowledge base than you are as the customer. There are some reseller only articles and things in there, for the purposes of some of those fixes might be rather dangerous, right? So SolidWorks flags those things accordingly. So, we're going to be able to search for and find more, but this is really meant for you to kind of self-serve on the knowledge base side of things. And then the link below that is your enhancement request. That's going to be your ability to put in what we call an ER. And that's not a bug. That's, I would like it if the software does this, right? And I've had lots of talks with R&D over the years. The enhancement requests go to a specific area within the software, and you can submit your enhancement request as a new, or you can tag yourself in an existing one, right? So Ryan's running a search for lock rotation, right? Here's all the SPRs that are enhancement requests for how lock rotation works, right? If you find the one that applies to you, you can associate yourself to that. The more ticks that it gets, the more, SolidWorks says, okay, more and more customers want this enhancement, right? And that's that vote for enhancement. Or the button to the right of that is make a new one. If nobody's complained about this yet, you can be the first one to put it in, and then it can start getting votes, right? And ultimately, the more people that vote on enhancement requests, R&D is spending more time, to enhance the software in that regard.
And if you work in a company with that, I tell people like, hey, you work with 15 other people, get them in there to vote for it as well too. It is the squeaky wheel gets oiled here. It's not, they don't look at it like, oh, customer ABC wants this. They look at it as, oh, here's a function and here's 15 ticks on it.
For sure. A couple other things on that customer portal page. Hitting back can be problematic in general with it.
Right.
But there's a software downloads area there as well. And that software downloads area is one of the places you can go to get the software package for the next service pack and things, right? When it comes to getting your software updates, right, you can go here into the SolidWorks customer portal, and there is a download software updates button within here. And that's coming up on the screen right now. So that is...
It's almost there. There we go.
There you go. That's going to be under My Products, I believe, or Downloads and Updates is right below there. So there's a download area down there. Yep, Downloads and Updates. And that's going to get you to the service packs that you are currently entitled to based on your subscription service. If for any reason you have locks on on these links, right, and you have, that lockout happens when you're off subscription service. It's not instantaneous for that lock to come off if you get back on subscription, and there are times when that lock remains on accidentally. Just give us a call on support, and we can go through the motions to get those locks removed off your account.
Well, even if you're on subs, the one thing is make sure you register your product first and foremost. So if you log in for the first time ever and you've never been to the customer portal for some reason, you're going to have those locks until you hit register my product. It's going to ask you your serial number. And then just for everybody's knowledge out there, just in case you don't know, if you go to the help button and go to About Solidworks, click the little show serial number, it'll give you that number. So it's not something you got to search for if you got an active seat of the software there.
So, if you prefer, GoEngineer does also host all service packs. And one of the things you'll find in the downloads and updates is it typically only has, this year, maybe last year, and a few service packs of last year, right? It doesn't go back years back. If you need an older copy, we have every single year and every service pack ever on the cloud. And we can get you a download link for every one of those SPs if you need it. Make sure to hit us up, and we've got there's download links right on the GoEngineer website as well if you prefer. There's system requirements here as well, and graphics cards and drivers. We hit on this graphics card thing, and we mentioned you needed an approved driver. Go ahead and click on that, Ryan. I'd like to at least bring up on the screen, what this looks like, right? So this is how you find an approved driver for SolidWorks, right? You're going to choose your year. You're going to choose your system vendor. If you have a home-built PC, and I'll refer to it as home-built as you built it from a pile of parts, right? Just leave that for any system vendor. If you are building that out for an HP or a Dell or anything specific, you can choose that off the list, right? And then based on that selection, it's going to let you pick the approved towers for the year, right? So Ryan's going to his HP ZBook 17G5, and then it's going to list all the approved cards that came in that piece of hardware, right? And then once you run that, you'll get a listing of all the approved drivers. Ryan doesn't have his year selected now because of tripping, but as you can see, that driver actually hasn't changed over the last few years, right? It's the R440 driver, and you can get some detailed notes about that driver version over to the right. It's important to note the driver version there because in your Windows operating system, when you go to look at your video card driver, it's not going to say R440. It's going to say that detailed number that Ryan was just hovering over. And that's going to be under your device manager inside of this PC is typically how I get to it.
Oh.
So you right-click this PC and go to Properties, and then you will pull up a screen that shows you the operating system, your RAM. Go to the upper left corner of that, and there's a display. There's a device manager, and then you're looking at display adapters from there. And I'm sure in Windows 10 you can search for it as well. Once you get to display adapters, you can see the driver on that as well, right?
There it is, system.
That will show. That'll show the different video card driver that you're running compared to what's on the system as well. And then, you're wanting to run what, SolidWorks has as an approved driver relative to that, right? And again, you can run a newer driver than what SolidWorks has recommended if you want to. But the danger in that, if you will, is if SolidWorks has not tested it, that may be the cause of some crashing, right? So when we look at this, Ryan's running the drivers of 4318, right? The driver version over on the right is a 44166.
That's the problem.
So there's a newer version out there, right? And as you can tell from the date, Ryan's last update was on 513. There's probably a newer driver available out there. That said, it doesn't mean you should necessarily update to the latest driver. I'm a big proponent of don't fix what's not broke. All right. If SolidWorks is running well with this video card and this driver, you don't need the latest, greatest one. Right. There are certain new functionalities they're coming out with video cards that the latest driver is a requirement for, particularly with the rendering engine stuff with visualize and things. But ultimately, go with what is working. If you've got the latest, greatest, and you're having problems, you can go and look at an older, supported driver as well. And then if you are on a machine that's not listed as far as any system vendor is concerned, just make sure that you're choosing the any system vendor, and you're going to have to kind of choose what driver you want to try out, right? If you've got a home built PC, you can go and download and try the HP ZBook a driver if you want to, right? I've got a couple of towers near me here that we absolutely, a lot of us build our own hardware, right? I've got a server over to my left and another tower to my right that are home-built machines, and I've had really good success running some of the Dell or HP drivers in those environments for the video card that I have in there, right? So don't be limited by the workstation. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend putting a Dell driver on your HP machine, right? And vice versa. But if you've got a home-built machine, certainly try, some of the different drivers there until you find the one that works the best. And as Ryan pointed out, the RX tool can run a benchmark for you and give you some information back. But really, to me, it's about reliability, right? So I try the driver out, and if I don't get crashing, then that's probably the driver for me. Right?
We did have a question here about as far as if they're supporting several sites through the customer portal, and that's just a matter of registering each site's serial number so that you're attached to that site. So you can register more than one product for yourself. So we definitely had the same thing. We run into similar issues when you have a network license. Network license generally has a single serial number, and if you've got a site with 20 people in it, they're going to use that same serial number. So it's just a matter of, if you're supporting, Eileen, if you're supporting a multiple sites, just get one of the serial numbers, register your name to it. That'll grant you access into that area for you at that point in time. All right. So I think that kind of covered everything. John, did you have anything else?
No, I think that hit on everything we wanted to talk about today.
Okay, and then
we were shooting for about an hour and a half and ended about 2 minutes short. So
we're about there. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Is there any last questions from anybody out there? You can either use the Q&A or you can put it into the chat. Just so Eileen's all done. She's taken off. Other than that, hopefully you guys learned something. If anything, if there's questions, if there's concerns, if there's frustrations, if you can't solve them yourself within a limited amount of time, get a hold of us. It's what we're here for. A lot of you guys are paying subscription. It's exactly what subscription is for. So, it is one thing to learn what the problem is and figure it out, but we've got a lot of experience doing this. You're talking to two of some more of the experienced people out there, and we've had to deal with it in the real world and on the application side as well too. I don't see any more. I think we're going to go ahead and call it, guys. I do appreciate everybody's time here. Once again, if there's anything that you forgot about, there'll definitely be a way for you guys to get back with us. You can definitely feel free to do that, and we'll go ahead and call it a day. John, thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you're here. You helped out a lot, man.